guys, welcome back to the channel. Well, in true VW Nut Garage fashion, it's been something like, I think, 8 months since the last time I did a video on this car. If you watch those last two videos, we were working on the charge pipes and intake system for my new turbo motor build. I really haven't done much as far as the engine setup goes on the car since that point, although I have been doing some other detail work on the car, really trying to focus on some of the other things that need to happen besides the engine itself. We'll go over a few of those changes in a little bit, but today's video is going to be all about the fuel system. We're going back with Megasquirt 3 fuel injection, so I need to build up an entire fuel system for the car, rated for EFI fuel pressures. I had this car fuel injected about a decade ago, but there's nothing left as far as that fuel system goes. And so we're starting from the ground up, building everything out and trying to dial it in real nice. Nothing to do but to do it, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, we'll do a quick walk around the car so you guys can kind of see the current state of everything since the last time we did a video on it. Focus has been really kind of everything but the engine. As you can see, kind of got the bodywork all pretty well put back together. Got front fenders back on it, all the lights, the front bumper, running boards. And then lately I've spent quite a bit of time working on the back end of the bodywork. So if you follow along on my Instagram, those are Creative Carcraft stock width fiberglass rear fenders. And then I picked up an OG 67 only rear apron a couple years ago and finally got it set up on the car to replace my original, which is pretty beat up. Again, it's a removable setup. Got it set up with Zeus fasteners. Really makes getting the engine in and out a lot easier. So a lot of work has been done on the car sort of in the background. Again, nothing on the engine, just trying to get everything ready to go. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, I'm ready to have this thing running and driving. There's a lot of work to do on the engine, but before the engine can be ready in the car needs to be ready for it. So I don't like to build an engine and have them sit. So I wanted to make sure that everything on the car was ready to go, so when the engine's built, we can get it in, fire it up, break in the cam, and be ready to roll. Anyway, that kind of brings you up to the current condition on the car. So let's go ahead and get started on that fuel system, see if we can get another step closer to getting this thing on the road. All right, so let's talk about the fuel system. Generally, I have a pretty good plan of what I want to do to put this together. There's going to be a few things that we're going to figure out along the way, such as like maybe specific locations of the filters and the pump. But overall, I have a high-level layout in my head already. So a few nights ago this week, I came out, took a bunch of measurements, basically drew everything out, and it really helped me to sort of plan out everything that I needed. Number of fittings, the orientation of whether I needed straights or 90s. I got on Summit's website, sort of picked out exactly all the things that I wanted, put an order together, and essentially we have everything here. To go into the detail on some of the parts here, we're going to start with some 3/8 aluminum tubing and some compression style -6 AN fittings. Essentially, that's going to allow us to run a rigid supply and return line all the way from the front of the car to the back of the car. Planning to sort of route that along the perimeter of the pan, probably up in the channel where the pan bolts go through. But that'll give us a nice rigid line front to back for the bulk of the distance of the fuel system. For the flex portion under the tank and up back under the parcel tray and around the engine, we're going to use Fragola push lock style fittings. They actually utilize a Parker push lock hose. I use this stuff quite a bit professionally. I've had pretty good success with it. That hose is rated for gasoline, diesel, alcohol, E85, etc. Should be good for our pump gas. In addition to the push lock fittings, we've got the Oetker style clamps, which sort of add just another layer of protection to really lock that hose onto the fittings. Some of the other critical fuel system parts here, we've got a Walbro 255 pump and an Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator. I've already swapped the spring in that regulator to set it up for EFI fuel pressures. Based on the Walbro specs, we got a Earl's, I believe that's a 35 micron pre-filter. And then for the post filter, we've got a OEM Motorcraft based product. This is a Wix 33243 filter. Also using some Earl's quick connect to -6 conversion fittings. So essentially this entire fuel system will be 3/8 based or -6 AN. We'll go in and out of the engine bay through some bulkhead fittings since a lot of the fuel handling stuff will be up underneath the package tray. The engine bay is going to be pretty crowded with everything else, so trying to minimize how much of the fuel system's in the engine bay except for the lines going to the rails and back. Anyway, we should be off to a pretty good start here, so let's go ahead and get putting this together. All right, so the first thing we'll do, kick open the garage door, let the sunlight come in. I need to get this up on some jack stands so we can start crawling around underneath it. And we'll go ahead and start laying everything out and see what we can install. Alright, so new day, same project. Where we left off yesterday, I was just trying to figure out exact details of where everything was going to go. So I spent the afternoon basically laying on the floor, crawling underneath the car, really trying to fit up everything. So I spent the time to put all the fittings on all the pieces so I could really figure out the true bulk and really kind of understand what was going to work best where. Now when I started, I said I had a general idea of what I wanted to do for the fuel system. When you get down that level of exact locations and how things are going to mount, that was what I needed to figure out on the car itself. So we've got some parts like the fuel filter that had options. Do I want it up underneath the front of the tank, or do I want it at the back of the car? Ultimately, the big major consideration there is what's going to be the easiest to work on, what else has to go in the car so I don't put something in the way of something else. So I think where I settled is that the pre-filter and the fuel pump are going to go up front. I'm going to run a supply line across the perimeter on the driver's side of the pan. The fuel filter will be right behind the floor pan ahead of the torsion housing. And then we'll run all the stuff underneath the package tray to the bulkheads, out of the bulkhead through the fuel pressure regulator, and I'll run the return line down the passenger side of the pan. So I think that's going to lay out pretty good. I've got most of the pieces as far as attachment. I like to use nutserts everywhere. I'm kind of short on some of the nutserts that I need, so I'll have to place an order for some of those. But I think in part I've got basically everything else I need to lay it out. So we'll go ahead and get started, see if we can get this knocked out today.
hours later.
Alright, so a big jump forward in time. Basically everything on the fuel system except for the final connections to the fuel tank are finished now. Just basically buckled down this afternoon. I knocked it all out. I tried to do a little bit of recording, and you'll see in some of that, but kind of ran into an issue where I couldn't get in there and get the camera to see anything, or all I could still get in there and actually do any work. So I figured basically what I did is kind of shut the camera off the side, knocked everything out, and we'll do a walk around now, and I'll kind of show you how everything turned out. Alright, starting up at the front, here's how everything kind of ended up laying out. I've got the pre-filter and fuel pump mounted here off to the left-hand side, and the outlet line runs around, kind of snakes across the master cylinder and connects over here to the rigid supply line that runs down the driver's side of the pan. The return line basically mirrored on the passenger side. You can see the fitting there. So like I said, basically everything's done except for the two lines from here and here back to the tank. So once I get the tank pulled back out, get it prepped, we should be ready to finish this up. And here's the supply line. It basically runs down the perimeter of the floor pan, basically pop on the outside, sort of have kind of an offset hole there where I jump to the inside. And you can see basically we just run down the full perimeter of the pan. Clearly I'm missing some hardware here, so I just have the vibration clamps just sort of zip tied into place right now. I got to run to the hardware store tomorrow and get a few pieces of hardware to secure all that. But then basically it comes around here, makes a 90-degree turn, and transitions to AN, and then my flex line running up to the fuel filter. Alright, now underneath you can see where we transition to the flex line with the Fragola push-on fittings and Parker push-lock hose. Got some split loom to act as rub protection where it goes back behind the torsion housing. P-clamp to kind of secure the line in place. And we basically come up over the traction bar and into the fuel filter there. And so, again, those are the Earl's Quick Connect to -6 conversion fittings. That's a Wix 33243 filter. And basically I come on the outlet side of that and tie into the bulkhead to go into the engine bay. Here's a better shot of the bulkhead coming in the engine bay. Of course, once I get the engine built, I'll have to finish the fuel lines for the engine side. That'll be the inlet side, and then the return leaving the engine bay on the passenger side. Basically the same situation here, leaving the bulkhead, snake over the top of the traction bar, into the fuel pressure regulator, which I've got mounted just below the package tray, and the outlet side going out across the torsion housing again, and to the rigid return line on the passenger side of the pan. Again, some split loom in a couple spots, just to add some road protection. Initially, generally I'd like to kind of keep the fuel pressure regulator where it's a little bit easier to access, but realistically, you really kind of set that initially and then sort of forget about it. And the fact that the engine bay is going to be so crowded with the turbo setup and the piping and everything, it just seemed better just to go ahead and locate that down here. And then same situation for the return line, basically run on the inside of the channel, kind of make the dog leg up the front, and pop back in. If you got a key out here, you'll see I don't have a jacking point on this side. That was removed a while back when I did the battery tray replacement, and I haven't quite welded that back in yet. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how everything came out. Pretty much like I planned from the get-go, made some adjustments along the way, but that's pretty typical for projects like this. The Parker push-lock hose and Fragola push-on fittings seem to work out pretty well. As you'll see in some of the video clips I'll insert here, the Audiker clamps, which add, just a little bit more protection to make sure those things are nice and locked onto the fittings, worked out really well. So I'm pretty happy with that. Like I said, I've used this stuff a lot professionally. Kind of took an extra step with the Audiker clips or clamps for this particular setup, just to give me a little bit more peace of mind. Well, I think that's going to basically wrap this up. Thanks for following along. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing. It really kind of helps keep me motivated, keep me moving on the car. I'm really hoping to have this thing running relatively soon. I was hoping for this year. Realistically, the year's gotten away from me. Quite a bit of work left to do, and it's likely going to be after the first of the year before it's back on the road. Anyway, if you want to continue, you want to see this thing get fired up, see the engine build, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like this video, and follow along for more. Thanks for watching.